When you first think of Australia, what comes to mind? Is it the Great Barrier Reef, the movie Finding Nemo, or the Sydney Opera House? For most of you, it's probably the movie Finding Nemo. I was lucky enough to interview one of my best friends when I studied abroad. She grew up in Melbourne, Victoria, which is way down south. And then for the past 3 years, she's lived in the Sunshine Coast in Queensland, which is right about here. This is where she studied abroad. The cool thing about Australia is it's the largest island in the world, but also the smallest continent. There's 6 states that make up Australia, and then there's also the Northern Territory. Australia is made up of many different ethnic groups, including the Aboriginals. There's many different facts about Australia that I'm going to share with you today, and we're going to start by looking at tourism in Melbourne. When I asked Shawnee what she thought the main attraction of Melbourne was, she said for people that aren't from Australia, it's the Great Ocean Road, and then people that are from Australia, the sports aspect. She also said that Melbourne reminds her a lot of London. And here's a picture of Melbourne. It does, I've seen some pictures and I visited it, and I've never been to London, but they do look relatively the same. The Great Ocean Road, there's many different, you drive along the coast of southern Australia, and there's many different stops, but I'm going to talk about 3, Bells Beach, the 12 Apostles, and the London Bridge. Bells Beach is really cool. It's pretty much a valley, and then there's the ocean. Rip Curl actually does a major surf competition there, and it's really pretty. And then we have the 12 Apostles, and these are the some of the 12 Apostles. They're limestone cliffs. They're 10 to 20 million years old. And they're created, originally they were caves. So originally this ran from here to here, and there was caves that were created from like wind and erosion. And then eventually the caves were destroyed from the ocean. And there's 12 of them. Well, there was originally 12, but now there's only 8. So they're kind of starting to dwindle down. London Bridge is really cool. As you can tell, well, it's now kind of referred to as the London Arch because it looks like the London Arch. But originally there was 2 caves in it, and when the first one fell, there were actually 2 tourists that were stranded on the far one, and they weren't harmed or anything, they just had to be rescued by helicopter. Whenever I asked her about the sports aspect, Melbourne is actually referred to as the sports capital of Australia. The Australian Open Tennis Championship is held there every year. There's also the Melbourne Cup Carnival, which is similar to our Kentucky Derby. And they comment that it's a celebration that stops the nation. It's a really big deal. People get all dressed up and stuff, and they love it. Also, this year, the Australian Masters for golf is going to be held there. That changes throughout the year. And rugby is also a really huge thing in Australia, especially Melbourne. I was able to actually go to a rugby game with Shawnee's family whenever I visited there, and it was really cool. It's similar to football. And they have different leagues, and there's like kind of similar to like the NFL, and then there's also a minor league. Since we've looked at the south, let's move north towards Cairns. Whenever I asked Shawnee what she thought Australia's biggest attraction was, she said the Great Barrier Reef, and I figured she would have said the Sydney Opera House, but she said since the Great Barrier Reef is natural, it's not man-made or anything, she thought that was a huge attraction. It's the largest reef in the world. It can be seen from outer space. It's made up of about 2,900 individual reefs. There's more than 1,500 fish species, dolphins, turtles, sharks, whales, and birds. It revenues about $2 billion each year, and I looked up the translation. Right now, an Australian dollar is equal to $1.02 in the United States, so it's relatively the same. And there's also 2 million visitors that go visit the reef each year. The one problem is, though, the reef is starting to get destroyed by scuba divers and things like that. People don't realize you can't touch anything with your fingers because the oil, you wouldn't think so, but the oils on your fingers, just by touching it, destroy the reef. So whenever I went scuba diving there, we got lectured that don't touch anything. So just, if you ever to visit, keep your hands to yourself kind of aspect. And here's some pictures that I took, actually. That's Finding Nemo, kind of, so that was pretty cool. And then there's a sea turtle. Next, I'm going to talk about the Australian Aboriginals. The University of West Sydney defines them as one of Aboriginal descent, identifies as one, and is accepted by the community in which he or she lives. They make up about 1.9% of the population, and they were estimated to come about 500,000 years ago from Asia. And whenever I was talking to Shawnee, she said, like, from what she's learned growing up, that she could probably say it's kind of similar to how the Native Americans are in our country. It's the same aspect. And here's some pictures. This one is more of a, like, I would consider him a real Aboriginal. The bottom left I actually took, and they're more like street players, kind of. I wouldn't say that they're real Aboriginals, but they know the culture of it. And there's a picture of the artwork. The cool thing that you can do about visiting, like if you go to Cairns, you can learn how to play the didgeridoo, throw a boomerang, different things like that, which is really cool. Clothing and culture. Shawnee says that the style is kind of like California surfer style. Uggs are, which we know them as coming from Australia, they actually refer to all boots like that as Uggs. The food is Vegemite, which is really gross. I've tried it. It's pretty much, it's just all salt. Like if you could eat a spoonful of salt, that's what it would taste like. They also eat kangaroo meat, which is, I could never do it, but they say like we eat deer meat, it's the same thing, but I could never do it. TV shows are relatively the same, and also social media websites are the same in that aspect. And I'm going to end with here just a few, no worries is the big saying of Australia. And then here is Taz, thank you, G'day is hi, bloke is an Aussie male, Barbie is barbecue. And the pronunciation, they don't use R's. If you notice, like a lot of people from the United States will say Melbourne and like Cairns, but you're not supposed to use R's.